Alright, so thank you for having me. In today's video, I want to talk about CSS. We call that cascading style sheets. That's what it means. Alright, so CSS is one of the three main languages that you have to learn if you want to become a web developer. And so we have been looking at HTML, and I think we've done justice to HTML, and we said it's about the structure. If you want to put content on the web page, you have to use HTML. But when it comes to the layout, how your page looks, you have to turn to CSS, and that's what we're going to be looking at. And so if you see those beautiful websites and great layouts, it's about CSS. It's the CSS at work. And so let's jump right into it. And so the first thing we want to talk about is creating that CSS file. Of course, in Visual Studio Code, it's easier. You can just hover over here, and you see right here we have what we call the new file icon, and then you can click over it, or you can come up here, click file and new file. But of course, I'm going to use my traditional approach. New file, click on it, and then we're going to name this, and I'm going to name it styles .css. You have to give that .css extension, whatever you name it, but it has to be .css. I could have named it index.css, sadson.css, but as long as it's .css, that's okay. All right, so having named this, now I want to point this file to this HTML because we want to apply these styles to this particular document. And so we want to tell this index.html that you should get your styles from this particular file here. And so how do we do that? In the head element here, you guys can see this is the opening tag, this is the closing tag. Inside here, we want to link these two. So we use what we call the link element. Okay, so it's going to have attribute, rel attribute, which is relationship, right? Short for relationship. And so we're going to say this is going to be a style sheet, and then it's going to have another attribute which we call the href, which is a URL, right? And it's going to point to the location of this particular file, this style sheet. And so this is the location, and so we're going to say // and we're going to have that CSS, and then I'm going to close this. Usually we could say / and then closing angle bracket, but you might not need to put this // this is a self-containing element. You don't need to put a closing tag. All right, so right now this CSS is going to, this HTML is going to get its styling from this CSS. So whatever styles that we're going to put in here, they're going to be recognized by this particular document. All right, let us first open this in the web browser. And so I'm going to open with Live Server, and you guys can see we have, this is my website, and then we have these inputs. And so what we're going to do is I want to talk about what is cascading style sheets. Some people might not be familiar, so let me just do some. Let me just explain what CSS means and why is it called CSS. It's called CSS because cascading style sheets. This is an abbreviation, right? Where does this come from? It comes from the fact that you could have a number of style sheets pointing to one document, so all these styles will be cascading to this particular document. And so that's the whole idea. That's the notion. All right. So I could have a number of style sheets active for a single document at any given moment in time. They are coming from different levels. And that's the whole idea of cascading style sheets. And that's where it comes from. We want to talk about syntax, of course, before we even do anything. You need to understand what is the syntax. How do you write the CSS? How do you declare this CSS in the style sheet? All right, so we use what we call selectors to choose elements from our HTML document. And so what I'm going to do is let's look at this document. What are the elements that are in this document? You can see there's a body here, there's an H1, there's a form, there's a label, there's an input, and many others. And so these are what we call elements. And so we need a way to select these elements. And so we use what we call selectors. And these selectors can be grouped into different categories. And so one of the categories is what we call the simple selectors, and another category is what we call attribute selectors. We have another one called pseudo class and pseudo elements. These are two. And then we also have what we call combinators, which is a combination of, maybe elements and stuff like that. And so I am not going to be touching on those. I'm simply going to touch on simple selectors. All right. So this is the syntax. We have a selector, and then we have curly brackets, and then we have what we call a property, and then colon, and then we have a value to that property, and then semicolon like this. And so this is how we declare things in CSS. And so this is how we write our CSS. And so I'm going to do it here. I have to comment that out, right? So that we don't have a syntax error. Of course, if I don't comment it out, we have a syntax error. So by the way, if you comment something out, it will be ignored when it runs in the browser. And so this is what we have. All right. So I say we have simple selectors. Simple selectors can be divided into three. We have what we call elements, and we have what we call IDs, and then we have what we call classes. But of course, I'm going to start with elements. So I'm going to comment this out as well, so that it gets ignored. And so we're going to start with elements. So what are the elements? And we went and looked at this document, and we said we can have a body, H1 form, label, etc. These are elements. And so let's target one element in here and do justice to that element. And let's say we are targeting the H1. H1 is our selector at the moment. If you look at this syntax, selector, followed by what? Curly brackets, right? Easy. And then what comes? Property and value. And so let's go back. Before we even talk about these things, I want you to look at this document in the web browser. This is the element that we are targeting, the H1. What are the properties of this H1? Can you think of? The color, of course, yeah. The alignment, where is it aligned? The margin, does it have a margin, and etc. And so those are the properties, So obviously, when you come here, when you're talking about these properties, we are looking at this specific element, and we are saying, what are the properties of this particular element? And say, oh, okay, let's start talking about its color. Okay, yeah, that's a property. And then colon, if you remember, guys, selector, and then curly brackets, and then we mentioned about the property, and then colon, and then we have a value. What value can we give to a color? Well, we can give it maybe a color of red, right? Yeah, we can. That's a color. Yeah. If the beauty about Visual Studio Code is generous. If you hover over, bam, look at that. It says, set the color of an element's text. Wow. Yeah. Isn't this text? This is text. This is my website. This is text. H1 has got a text element inside it, and that's what we are targeting. And we are targeting its color, and we said it's red. Yeah. So if we save, is the text going to change color? Yeah, let's see for ourselves. Boom! Wow, it's red. Yeah. So we targeted that. And so this is how CSS works. As simple as that. All right. So let's look at another property. For this particular element, the H1, what are the property? We say text align. We want it to be aligned to the center, and so we could say text align. Yeah, boom. Visual Studio is generous, like I said. It uses what we call IntelliSense. It knows what I want and say, oh, okay, I'm gonna give it to you, and so it gave it to me. Boom, text align center. If I save this, remember all the time to save. If you have a circle here, it means you haven't saved your work, and so now I know I've saved my work because I have a cross here. And so if I go back, oh, look at that. The text is aligned to the center. Oh, wow. Beautiful. That's how, CSS works. And so I could target any one of these elements and, try and tamper with its properties, declare its properties. And so now I'm affecting the layout, the color, the position, and everything. And so that's how CSS works. I guess you guys have had enough for today. Yeah, and so we are going to discuss more in our upcoming lessons. And so I want to thank you for your time. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please remember to do so. Any comments, please leave them in the comment section. I appreciate your support. See you in our next video. For now, I'm out. Cheers.